Уважаемые гости, сегодня 18 февраля 2022 года, 11 часов по московскому времени. Позвольте заседание Диссертационного совета по защите Салчак Аи Михайловны на соискание ученой степени кандидата психологических наук по научной специальности 535 «Социальная психология, политическая и экономическая психология» на тему «Образ отца у тувинских подростков из неполных семей» считать открытым. Я вынуждена объявить технический перерыв 1. Уважаемые коллеги, технический...
Distinguished colleagues, technical break now, number 1 is closed. We continue our meeting. The dissertation of Aya Salchak for the degree of the candidate of Psychological Sciences, specialization 535, Social Psychology, on the topic the image of the father of tuvan teenagers from single-parent families, according to the order of Scientific Secretary, St. Petersburg University, Alexander Gnotov, from the 25th of November 2021. Me, Svetlana Gurievna, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor, Head of the Department of Social Psychology, St. Petersburg University, was appointed the chairperson of this Dissertation Council, and by the same order the members of the Dissertation Council were approved. Let me introduce them. To the left, there is distinguished Professor Svetlana Posakhova, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Department of St. Petersburg State University, the Department of Psychology of Education and Pedagogic. In the remote interactive mode, we have got Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Social Psychology, St. Petersburg University, Lyudmila Pochebut. Lyudmila Georgievna, can you see and hear us? Yes, I can. Thank you. Here with us is Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Russian Hetens University, Lyudmila Regush. Good afternoon. Can you see and hear us? Thank you very much. Today with us is Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor, Head of the Department of the General Psychology, Armenia, Yerevan State University, Aganesian. Mr. Aganesian, thank you very much. I'm here with you. And our candidate is here with us, Salchak Aya. Good afternoon. Also, there is a scientific supervisor, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Legal Psychology of Tuvan University, Sitnikov Valery. Distinguished colleagues, in order to improve their communication, I ask you, dear colleagues, to turn off your microphones. Those who are in the remote interactive mode, do not forget to turn them on when you are given the floor. I also inform you that audio and video recording of our meeting is being conducted, as well as live broadcast on the St. Petersburg University website. Simultaneous interpretation of speeches from Russian into English is being provided. At this time, an email address is posted on the live broadcast of the meeting of the Dissertation Council, where during the meeting all listeners can express their opinions and send questions to the applicant online concerning her dissertation and the current scientific discussion of her speech. These questions will be forwarded to me by the technical services, and I will voice them during the discussion. Questions must be related to the applicant's presentation and the content of her dissertation. The name, position, and place of work of the author of the question must be indicated. Questions that are not related to the scientific discussion, to the discussion of the dissertation, to the text, and assessment of the dissertation itself won't be voiced. In accordance with the procedure for awarding the academic degree of the candidate of sciences, academic degree of Doctor of Sciences at St. Petersburg University, approved by local regulations of St. Petersburg University, a meeting of the Dissertation Council is considered eligible if at least 2/3 of the approved membership of the Council takes part in its work, but not less than 4 people. Our Dissertation Council consists of 5 people, 3 members are in the remote interactive mode. All members of the Dissertation Council are provided with the audiovisual contact. Thus, there is a quorum. I ask an employee of the department for supporting the activities of the Dissertation Council, the curator of the defense, to issue an attendance sheet. The procedure of today's meeting of the Dissertation Council, with the total duration of approximately 2 hours, is the following. A short report of the chairperson. There are possible questions. And the questions to the candidate strictly according to her report, answers of the candidate. Speeches of all the board members, as well as the questions and proposals to the candidate, about 10 minutes per speaker. The speech of the chairperson with the review, about 10 minutes, answers of the applicant for a scientific degree to questions and comments of the members of the Dissertation Council. Open discussion, speeches at the request of those present at the defense of the dissertation. Specific questions and suggestions strictly on the topic of research. At the same time, all interested persons are requested to register in the registration form and completely introduce themselves. Presentation by the chairperson of the questions addressed to the applicant, which came in order to discuss this speech, and scientific discussion on the broadcast of the meeting of the Dissertation Council on the St. Petersburg University website. Answers of the questions which take more than 2 minutes won't be voiced. The speech of the scientific supervisor, no more than 3 minutes. Discussion of the results of the defense by the members of the Dissertation Council before the open vote, during which the sound of the broadcast is muted. Open roll call, counting of the votes by the chairperson of the Dissertation Council, with the entry of the results into the minutes of the meeting. Making a decision on awarding or not awarding an academic degree. Concluding remarks of the applicant, no more than 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, are there any questions or objections to this regulation? If there are no objections, we'll proceed to the implementation of the rules of the meeting. But before, please turn off the sound of mobile phones. Thank you for understanding. Dear colleagues, dear board members who are in the remote interactive mode, I ask you not to turn off your mobile phones. Thank you for your understanding, and let us get down to the meeting. The dissertation of Salchak for the degree of the candidate of Psychological Sciences, Psychological Specialization 535, Social Psychology, on the topic The Image of the Father of Tuvan Teenagers from Single-Parent Families, was accepted for the defense by the order of Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University 10-75-9/1. Salchak wrote her dissertation research on the basis of tuvan University as a postgraduate student. Her scientific supervisor is Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Legal Psychology, St. Petersburg State University, Sitnikov Valery. The number of publications of our candidate is 3 works, 3 publications from the Ministry of Russian Federation. All the documents submitted by the applicant on the information I received from the curator meet the requirements and are stored in the applicant certification file. Their copies are held by an employee of the department for maintenance the activities of the Dissertation Councils, who is now in the hall. Before giving the floor to the applicant, dear members of the Dissertation Council, do you have general questions to the applicant? And if there is a necessity to announce and consider the entire list of documents submitted by the applicant for the defense? No questions? Thank you. Brief presentation of the applicant. Dear candidate, the floor is yours. You have got 15 minutes. Distinguished board members and Svetlana Zakhotovna, let me introduce to you my results of my study on the topic the image of the father of tuvan teenagers from single-parent families. My curator is Mr. Sitnikov, and the image of father was very well studied, and the radical change of the economic conditions in our countries was reflected on Tuva Republic, and the level of the of life of the population was also changed, and the growth of unemployment was radical, especially among males, and some traditional ethical values were reshifted. Also, the number of families where children have not seen their father, but they have the image of hypothetical father, and radical shift from the heads of the family to modern image of the father is shared. As for the actuality of the topic, we can judge that for the past times, social perceptive images are very important, and we study the role of the father in terms of the bringing up, and we can see these topics in foreign works. Tokarev studied the specifics of educational value of the father, and the type of family was not taken into account. Posakhova-Lipa studied the peculiarities of father's image as the factor for actualization in teenagers' age. In the works of Manyorov, the image of self was studied, but in these studies, the peculiarities of the perception of children of the father were not studied, regardless the age. We studied the structure of father's image in teenagers in different families of different types. All modern studies did not consider ethnical and cultural peculiarities of these images. The image of the father, regardless the type of the family, has their own peculiarities. This structure changes and depends on the type of the family. The aim, the object and subject of the research are represented in the slides. The entire scope of the research is also represented in the slides. We have the hypothesis, the peculiarities of father's image and their correlation with eye images, life resistance, and ways of behavior have their own peculiarity 459 teenagers were surveyed from different troubled families, and the research was conducted by pedagogue psychologist from the town of Kazylyk, and the teenagers from rural and urban areas were studied and surveyed. They know Russian language very well, and written agreements were received from their parents. The image of the father is a result of the reflection of personal reflections and individual characteristics of the father in the image of the teenager, and the correlations of me image and father image girls are closely connected with this, and the correlation between the image of the father they have peculiarities depending on the image of the father, and it depends on the age of the teenagers. And we use the range of research methods and studied mathematical methods of data recycling, and it was stipulated by the tasks of the research. Let me turn to the main results of the research. How can we judge from the table, regardless the type of family and gender, the teenagers from the first range of meanings choose the specific type of the father, me image, and the image of father of a teenager. Girls from full families, the image of father is closely connected with the family. The correlations between the father's image has specific peculiarities depending on the gender of teenagers. Life resistance are of the same type. Boys are more diverse than girls. Correlation analysis and the base of the behavior. The boys from divorced families is different, and 31 correlation. Girls from full families have 9 correlation. Girls from orphan families have 3 correlations, and girls from diverse families have no correlations. From the data we obtained, we can say that the image of the father is not sustainable. In early age, 11 and 12 years old, they don't have any specific peculiarities. It is interesting to highlight then more peculiarities have the boys from such families. 13 and 14 aged have certain peculiarities, and Girls and boys from full families have more peculiarities. Boys from full families describe more realistic, interesting, funny, communicative, wise, and bold. Boys from orphan and divorced families describe a father, a traditional tuvan father, modest, attentive, aged, those who are aged 15, 16 years old, girls as a dear, jealous, and so on. It can be connected with the fact that in older age, girls need more care. The structure and content of father's image is more complicated when teenagers grow up, and the type and gender of the family. The first three ranges and most volume occupies emotional, social, and body sphere. And the image of tuvan's father becomes more diverse, and the correlation of eye image is different, dependent on the type and gender of the family. Depending on the age and type of family, those who are aged of 11 and 12 years old, they don't understand the image of the father at a high age. Girls age 15, 16 years old, they highlight emotional and social components. To conclude, social perceptive images are formed on the basis of concrete people with whom a child communicates. This research give a conclusion. We described general images I conclude my speech. Thank you very much for the attention. And now we turn to the questions. Dear board members, do you have any questions? Svetlana Posachova, do you have any questions? For me, it's very interesting. If you have a father in single-parent families, what was their attitude to this topic? Please answer this question. In the Republic of Tuva, there is an active interaction of the society where fathers cooperate and they actively participated in this event. In this society, and we will share the results of this research. Do you know the studies which reflected the connection of single-parent families and deviant behavior of the teenagers? And the peculiarities of deviant behavior in single-parent families and so on were not studied before, and it is the first study in the Republic of Tuva. And you devoted your research to the culture of Tuvan people, but you speak about gender differences. What is the stereotype of the perception between women and men? Gender peculiarities. This is patriarchal types of families. And the mother takes an active part in the bringing up of a child. And if it is a coming father, if parents are divorced, dear board members, do you have any other questions? Did you conduct a comparative analysis between Russian and Tuvan teenagers? Did you study any differences? On the basis of Hudson's University, we conducted the image of the father at St. Petersburg School, non-ethical, and unfortunately we didn't find any considerable differences. And teenagers from divorced and orphan families, they are not different. And the father, grandfathers, brothers, elder brothers can act as a father. And in case of Tuvan teenagers, dependent on the family type of the family, divorced and orphan family, they have specific peculiarities. I hope that I answered the question. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions? Mikhailovna, please specify. As for the teenagers, did they live in rural or urban area? Thank you very much for the question. Gymnasium number 9. I worked there from 2016-2018. They were teenagers from rural and urban area. Here in Tuvan Republic, the education of a child, parents sometimes move from the rural to urban area, and we covered all teenagers from both rural and urban areas. Yes, we didn't consider the differences. Sorry for that. Lyudmila, your question: how did you prove the hypothesis about the image of the father, that it is connected with the life resistance and connected behavior? Why didn't you take self-evaluation and so on? How did you stipulate this hypothesis? Thank you very much for the question, dear Lyudmila. The actuality of the hypothesis was taken from the actuality that for this moment, Tuvan Republic is the last place concerning the lifestyle and forecasting, guessing the situation and behavior of a teenager where the image of the father influences their life resistance, and what coping strategies teenagers choose depending on the type of family. Dear Lyudmila Alexandrovna, did we answer your questions? Partly. Well, I am satisfied. I have got a provoking question. If there is a situation of choice to have a real father or positive image of a father, can you explain the difference? You see the children who have never seen their father, but they have a positive image of father. Or it is better to have a real father, and it does not matter whether doesn't matter what character he has. Well, we analyze the methodology for social orphans. In our republic, social orphanage is very well developed, and social image of the father hierarchical in orphanage school, regardless the gender. The image of a father is idealized. It is composed from positive characteristics, whereas the image of the father in full families, there is a negative image of the father. The teenagers from orphanage families, they filled 10 points. There was the feeling that because of the lack of father's image, and in fact this complicated question, it is a complicated question. It is better to have a real image of a father in which they are ready to accept their negative moments. And when a father don't know anything up to 50% about himself or herself, these teenagers will be in search of I-image, and it will be difficult to interact with the environment. Thank you very much. It's very interesting to hear your opinion on this. And what is the role of the mother in shaping the image of the father? To form the image of the father, the mother's role is very important because the mother transmits the image about the father when we studied the frequency of using the definitions, we found out more positive definitions in orphanaged family when after the death of the father he has more positive characteristics, and from the mother. And in terms of modality, teenagers have more negative characteristics. The mother transmits the image which was conserved, and the teenagers from divorced families, in terms of modality, they have more negative image. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, if you don't have any questions, no questions, let us turn to the next point of our agenda, the speeches of board members with their feedback. Let us remind our candidate can answer the reviews after each speeches or after all reviews. If you don't have any objections, I offer to answer after all speeches. I was informed that there are no external reviews All the reviews were published at St. Petersburg website. I offer you to focus only on the main moments of the dissertation and on the remarks. Dear Svetlana, the floor is yours. The first floor is yours. Dear board members, dear candidate, and all those who are present, I want to say that for the topic is very interesting among foreign and Russian specialists. And social and cultural experience is reflected in scientific research, and it leads to the fact that the process of psychophysiological development is defined both by the mother and father. And social sense of the father is changed from culture to culture. And the image of the father is changed, starting with the birth and to bringing up of children. I would like to remind you that since 2021, that the third Sunday is considered the Father's Day, and the lack of father is perceived more difficult than before. It is logical that there is a question: how can modern children perceive the father? And teenager age is an abundant age. It is independence, individual constructual and destructural adaptive strategies. Despite this fact, there is a lack of research concerning the content of father's image between teenagers, and this fact, in connection to high social and psychological consideration, defines the actuality of dissertation of our candidate, which is devoted to the image of the father of tuvan teenagers from single-parent families. The dissertation of our candidate can be referred to focused research. The research covers the image of the father between tuvan teenagers and correlation with the image of the father is absent in other cultures. Secondly, the author concentrates the attention on the perceptual image of the father, and our candidate does not touch other approaches and the problem of father's image is described very laconically and occupies only 70 pages of the text. Thirdly, the research concentrates on the presence or absence of the father in the family. Of course, this direction impedes the perception of the father's image between tuvan teenagers, but it gave the opportunity to and the empirical material is also available. The author considers the father's image. The image of the father is explained from the position of the influence of family type, family image, and so on. And scientific novelty is without doubt. And it realizes the dissertation expands the image of the father in terms of ethnical and cultural phenomenon, which integrates the national peculiarities of the father, modern trends of the father. The father's image supplements the mechanisms of social consideration, and the correlations of father's image indicates it. And as for scientific novelty, it allows to differentiate the role, gender, and age peculiarities of children. The work of Salchak expands ethnic psychology and can become the background for further research into Vienna Republic. The results cover the peculiarities of social perception of teenagers living in tuvan in different structural families. Invariant peculiarities were found out, and new scientific fact is the connections between the age of teenagers and father image in full and single parent tuvan families. As for new facts, and there is a different integration stage in difficult living conditions which concentrate life resistance. The author proved the complex father's image, its individualization dependent on the gender and age of the family and type of the family. Tuvan boys and girls, practical peculiarity of the research is in the availability of the use of the results of parent-children conflicts in teenagers' families. Such results can be applied to different spheres, especially for fathers for whom it is difficult to communicate with their children. Also, general selection was applied, and the differentiation to family character, and it allowed to conduct quantitative and qualitative assessment of the results, and also domestic and foreign studies were taken into account. The structure of the dissertation is traditional, and the publication conforms with the author's position. And I want to say that ethnic and cultural studies with the participation of children, taking into account the topic of fathers. Here we should take into account correctness, and the research proves these professional and personal qualities. These peculiarities proves the practical significance of the dissertation, but there are some remarks to the dissertation. The first, in the research there was the absence of the correlation of teenagers and other groups and other European and Russian authors. What was the role of father's image in connection with tuvan culture? Number two, how can you explain that in father's image in tuvan only socially acceptable qualities? As for Russian psychologists, the father's image is defined by the attitude of teenagers to him, their social achievements, their communication. There is a question, does it influence the formation of father's image among tuvan teenagers? Number four, what are the practical recommendations for boys and girls, teenagers in full tuvan families concerning interaction of the father? And as for single families, my remarks concerns the range of stylistical and topographical mistakes and inaccuracies in your one slide. You wrote correctional analysis of communication, and my remarks don't reduce the overall positive impression from the dissertation. All in all, the dissertation is a completed original research, empirical research, and conforms with the tasks of the research. To conclude, the dissertation on the topic, the image of the father of tuvan teenagers from single-parent families, is a completed, qualified scientific work. The dissertation conforms with the main requirements stated by the order from 2016, procedure on awarding degrees at St. Petersburg University, and our candidate deserves the degree of the candidate of psychological sciences, specialization 535, social psychology, political and economic psychology. Point 11 was not violated by our candidates. Thank you very much. Svetlana, thank you for your feedback, and I invite Lyudmila Pachebut to give your remarks. Distinguished Svetlana, distinguished colleagues, board members, distinguished candidates, the review on the dissertation of Aya Salchak. The dissertation research on the topic is written on the actual topic. The author of our dissertation proves the actuality of the research. Aya highlights that currently there are radical changes of the traditional lifestyle in tuvan families and their values. If we compare the formation of the image in tuvan teenagers from single and full families, the aim of the research is to analyze gender and age peculiarities of tuvan image between families of different type living in Tuva Republic. It correlates with father's image and eye image and ways of behavior in teenagers in single and full families. As methods of the research, our candidate chose the structure of the human type image from Sitnikov's The Way of the Behavior, Tolkman, adapted by Kryukova, Their Life Resistance, and Leontiev, and so on, and Рассказов. Scientific novelty of the dissertation is in the fact that for the first time our candidate analyzed the peculiarities of social image of the father in teenagers of different gender and image and their different type. And social and cultural peculiarities of these images were studied. And teenagers from divorced and orphan families have traditional father's image formed on the basis of ethnic and cultural imaginations. Teenagers from full families have individual character because it reflects cultural image and specific imagination about real person. Theoretical significance of this research is in the fact that it reflects the peculiarities of the father's image in tuvan teenagers from different type. Practical significance is in the fact that main results can be applied to different spheres, and approbation of the work was on the basis of various conferences. In-depth analysis is also shown, and it allowed to our author to formulate the program of the research, define the aims and tasks of the research, to formulate hypotheses, and find adequate methods of the research. Analyzing the empirical part of the research, our candidate focuses on the formed. The author highlights emotional characteristics of father's image. The image of the father in orphan families or divorced families correlates with the image of from teenagers in full families. Eye image from full families, teenagers have the characteristics of emotional and social spheres, and girls from orphan families have differences, notice differences between fathers from full families, single families, and boys have motivational and social components. Eye image from teenagers from divorced families on the basis of emotional component. Our candidate conducted the analysis of the image dependent on the gender and age. She concludes that the structure and content of father's image are more complicated with the age of tuvan teenagers, and she describes the physical peculiarities of the father dependent on the type of a family, and taking into account the structural peculiarities of tuvan families and description of structural father's type. I would like to hear more detailed statements for the defense. On the whole, the dissertation of our candidate, Aya Salchak, is written very clearly. The author used 162 sources of scientific literature. Empirical research is very accurate, and the results of the research can be used in practice and can be applied to school upbringing of teenagers. The dissertation of our candidate on the topic, the image of the father in tuvan teenagers, conforms with the requirements of the order from 2016 number 11181/1, procedure on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, conforms with the requirements, and our candidate Aya Salchak deserves the degree of the candidate of psychological sciences, specialization 535, social psychology, economic psychology, points 9 and 11 of the order were not violated by our candidate. A board member, doctor of psychological sciences, professor of the Department of Social Psychology, St. Petersburg University, Pachebut. Thank you very much. Lyudmila, thank you very much for your feedback, for your remarks, for your questions. And now I invite Distinguished Lyudmila Rebush, the floor is yours. Distinguished colleagues, allow me to compose my speech differently. The main content of my feedback was sent beforehand, and it conforms with the main requirements for the evaluation of the dissertation, actuality, and other parameters necessary for this dissertation. And for the remarks, I would like to focus on the following facts, only on the moments which allowed me to make positive conclusions. There are three positions. Number one, rich empirical material was received orphanaged single families, boys and girls, teenagers aged 11, 12, 14, 15 years old. The image of the father was very well described: emotional, social, body, intellectual, and motivational, social, intellect, behavioral, and others. Secondly, the influence of father's image was very well described. The influence on eye image, life resistance, life sustainability, and empirical material in this respect, the author characterizes different teenagers and when analyzing then the eye image from of the father and the father's image from different type of families prove gender differences, as well as it proves the imagination that father's image is very considerable from boys from single families. The dissertation is very considerable and made in a contribution into the studied sphere. And the conclusion about the fact that in divorced families the father's image is different from the father's image from full families, and it is necessary to conduct specific psychological work with such teenagers. I want to conclude that the dissertation of Salchak deserves the degree of the candidate of psychological sciences. Thank you very much for your attention. Lyudmila Georgievna, thank you very much for your feedback. Lyudmila Alexandrovna, sorry for this mistake. And now I would like to give the floor to distinguished Professor Grant Mikhailovich. The floor is yours. Thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I would like to highlight that I will try to be as brief as possible, and I'm not going to focus on my full feedback. My review is posted on the website of St. Petersburg University, and there are reflected all the positive moments of the study, and it's actually empirical part of the research is reflected in my review. And for me, it was very interesting to read this dissertation. Let me focus on discussive moments and remarks. And I expect you, dear candidate, to answer them. The research of fathers in this sphere had specific trends, and it was very important to study the father for many specialists, but in this context the Salchak's study is in trend and conforms with the current requirements. But when I addressed the analysis of foreign literature, I saw that out of 29 sources, most part of them were dated by the previous century, 40 or 30 years ago. And our author published a lot of many articles. And I have a question which is connected with the language validity. It's a very actual question. Tuvan teenagers, please explain to us how did you study these teenagers, but during your report you explained that every teenager, Tuvan teenager, knows the Russian language. And for example, in the methodology, there is a task to explain the meaning of the word and how did teenagers cope with this task. I would like to highlight the importance of psychological aspects of the research. In section 1.2, the ethnocultural image of the father in Tuvan families, it would be better to conduct comparative analysis and take into account the historical development. Number 4, remarks concerning the technical character. In one case, you name the Russian specialists, scholars, and references to tables. There are inaccuracies concerning the references under table 2, page 39. There are some inaccuracies, and in connection with the requirements, it would be better to make more acute references, either digital or letter symbols. I have finished with my remarks, and they don't reduce overall positive impression from the dissertation. The aims and tasks were clearly formulated by our candidate, and the data characterize the high relevance. The dissertation of my conclusion of Aya Salchak on the topic "The Image of the Father of Tuvan Teenagers from Single-Parent Families" conforms with the main requirements stated by the order procedure on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. And our candidate Aya Salchak deserves the degree of the candidate of psychological sciences, specialization 535, social psychology, political and economic sociology. Points 9 and 11 were not violated by our candidates. Thank you for your attention. Grant Mikhailovich, thank you very much for your feedback. Thank you very much. And to conclude, me as a chairperson, I would like to voice my feedback. It is placed on St. Petersburg University website. A few words about the actuality of the word. Currently, there is a high interest in scientific circles to family values and to in-depth study of father's role in children's upbringing. And I am sure that this work is beyond the study of this topic among tuvan teenagers. Despite this fact, I would like to voice the remarks and questions. I would like to hear specifications and explanations. First of all, and I have to repeat the remarks of my colleagues, stylistical part of the work, there is lack of works of foreign and Russian researchers. There are some problems with concepts. Also, I would like to draw your attention the limited size of the first chapter. The next remark concerns the methodological and empirical part of the work. Composition of the family, nuclear family or extended family, the number of children in the family, multi-children families, and so on. These indicators would enrich the study, and there would be some changes in the results of the research. And the question about the character of concerning the relations with father after the divorce, and many other questions. Thirdly, the question is connected with the fact to what extent concerning the correctness of this study you surveyed children aged from 11 to 16. Who gave you permission? And what was the procedure itself? I would like to receive more detailed and corrected information. Despite these remarks, the dissertation of Aya Salchak on the topic "The image of the father of tuvan teenagers from single-parent families" conforms with the main requirements stated by the order procedure on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, and our candidate Aya Salchak deserves the degree of the candidate of psychological sciences, specialization 535, social psychology. Political and economic points 9 and 11 were not violated by our candidate. Thank you very much for your attention. Dear colleagues, let us turn to the answers of the candidate, which were voiced and reflected in the reviews. Distinguished board members, thank you very much for your review. Svetlana Timofeyevna, thank you very much for your feedback, for your remarks, questions, and suggestions. The first question: in your research, the aim was the peculiarities of father's image between in tuvans. We conducted pilot research in St. Petersburg, and we studied the father's image. And during the research, we could not understand considerable differences. Our teenagers perceived any father as a real father, and tuvan culture is reflected in tribal connections. The chief member of the family is a man. Number 2, thank you for the question that during the research we noticed that teenagers, regardless of the type and gender of the family, described the socially acceptable qualities. And if we take into account the modality, males from boys from full families have the difference in neutral modality, and if we compare according to the same types of family aged 15-16 years old, we see the change to positive and neutral modality. The boys from full families has critical character, and the father's image can change. Question 3. In our research, we wanted to study the image of fathers in full, single, and orphan families, and we did not take into account the relationships between fathers and teenagers. Number 4. Thank you. About the questions about practical recommendations. We did not develop practical recommendations between children from full families. We can elaborate and offer recommendations for boys and girls from full families. We can prevent conflicts between parents and children, and we can offer group trainings for teenagers and we can image the can form the image through the lens. And unfortunately, we did not consider practical recommendations from teenagers from full families. We can offer complex family therapy together with mothers, professional support of psychologists, and specific training group from teenagers where they can meet with the image of the father. Over the time of work, our candidate, we worked in Kizil, Tuvan Republic. We faced with the fact that girls from single parent families seek for help, psychological help, but to the opposite, the boys have difficulties to ask for such a psychological help. And the boys from single parent families miss their fathers, but it is difficult for them to confess it. And what we plan in the near future. And we agree with the remark concerning stylistical and spelling mistakes. Thank you very much. I am satisfied with the answers. Lyudmila Georgievna, thank you for your remarks and suggestions. Let me start with the fact. The first thing is to ask your question. The image of the father, it is result of the reflection of personal things and individual characteristics of the father. The structure and the content of father's image becomes more complicated with the age. In full families, the father's image is the same concerning boys and girls, and it is filled with a personal reflection of the father. In divorced families, the father's image, regardless gender, age of teenagers, is different. And teenagers from single parent families and stereotyped image of a male. In orphanage families, regardless the age of teenagers, the father's image is different concerning boys and girls. Girls describe masculine features and boys give more feminine features to the father. And girls from full families, eye image is closely connected with father's image. Boys from incomplete families, we found out gender peculiarities dependent on the type of a family. The repertoire of correlational features is more diverse. Boys from full families have more complicated connections and eye images for boys from full families. It is separated, the image is separated from usual life. Correlation of eye image with father's image from boys from incomplete families is more chaotic. There is, if they formulate negative image, it can provoke negative relations with teenagers. As a result, this eye image can form according to negative sample. Girls from full families take into account projection mechanism. It has more individual character. It is filled with girls from incomplete families have less connections of eye image with a father image in comparison to girls from full families. It proves that girls from single parent families, they are closely connected with father's image. Coping strategies, life resistance from full divorced and orphanage families have a lot of peculiarities depending on peculiarities. Incomplete families, coping strategies in boys are more diverse. The structure and content of father's image changes with the age of teenagers and so on. Coping strategies of girls from incomplete families of a different character, and boys from full families is masculine family. We can conclude that boys and girls are different from full families in comparison to incomplete families. Traditional image is described more realistic and is interesting, energetic, and communicative type. The girls aged 14, 15, 16, it can be connected with the fact girls need more emotional support, and girls from incomplete families, they can form mistaken perceptions As for the questions of Lyudmila Georgievna, that's all for these questions. Thank you for your attention. Lyudmila Alexandrovna, your question. You answered my question after your report. Well, thank you very much that you allowed me not to answer this question. Grant Mikhailovich, thank you very much for your questions, suggestions, for your participation in today's discussion. The first question. We are fully agree with your remark concerning the fact that we did not explain in full the theories concerning the problem of our research. We will take it into account in our further research in the process of our dissertation research. I published 3 articles. The peculiarity of this image between teenagers from incomplete families in Tuva Republic. Number 2. Thank you very much for the question about language validity. In Republic of Tuva, there are 2 questions, Russian and Tuvan. Teenagers aged from 11 to 16 know Russian very well. As for the procedure of the research, the empirical research was conducted individually. At first, they answered several methodologies, then methodology of social image of a person in order to state the structure and perceptual images. At the same time, the definition of the qualities were given by the children. When it was easier for them to give the definitions in their mother tongue and Russian, I paid attention to the specificity of translation, and we will reflect everything in our further research. And question number 4 of technical character. Distinguished Grant Mikhailovich, thank you very much for your corrections and sorry for our technical mistakes. I agree with your remarks. Светлана Посохова, Робот Манеров, Овчарова, Sitnikov, Tokareва. In the reference, we should have pointed out, and the page was wrong. As for section 4.3, we will take into account the remarks of your further research. And as for the answers of our chairperson, Svetlana Zakhotovna, I would like to highlight that we fully agree with your remark that we did not explain very well the approaches to our research which existed before, and we will consider it in our further research. We agree with the remark that initially we had to conduct generalized analysis of the problem, and after we had to turn to imagination about the father among tuvan teenagers. We will take into account in our further research. Thank you for useful empirical and we had to study the character of different family types and the procedure of empirical research, which was conducted in Kizil, Tuvan Republic, in 2016, 2018. And we received written agreements from teenagers' parents to conduct such research. Dear board members, are you satisfied with the answers of Aya Mikhailovna? Людмила Alexandrovna, Людмила Georgievna, I have a question. And if we speak about the father's image among St. Petersburg teenagers, you mentioned that everything is okay, and they perceived their another man as their father, as their real father. We conducted pilot research, and during this pilot research, and there were no considerable differences between teenagers from St. Petersburg according to the type of family. And dependent on the type of a family. It is very clear in case of full family, but in case of single parent family, unfortunately, we did not want to study the father's image of teenagers from St. Petersburg, and initially we conducted pilot research, and we were interested in tuvan teenagers. I am satisfied with your answers. Dear colleagues, And dear all those who are present here in the hall, there are no volunteers, dear curator of our dissertation council. There are no external questions. And now we turn to the next section of our agenda. And with great respect, I give the floor to the scientific advisor, supervisor, Valery Vladimirovich. A few words about our candidate. First of all, thank you very much, all board members, for the fact that in these difficult conditions you got acquainted with such a difficult problem. In my opinion, this problem is very urgent and very important. I would like to express my deep respect to Tuvan Republic, all citizens of Tuva. For the first time, when at 4 a.m. in 1941 they knew about the start of the war for the first time, early in the morning, they gave all their resources to the reserve fund, to the defense fund, but they were not the part of the Russian Federation, and they declared the war to Hitler. Only imagine that Russia and Tuva, these are different things, and they did all their best to help the USSR, despite the fact that they were not the citizens of the USSR up to the end of 1944. But they participated in this war, and they were awarded with these orders and medals. It was very interesting for me to it was very pleasant for me to get acquainted with life bearers of this Tuvan culture. I got acquainted with Aya Mikhailovna unexpectedly when I was the chairman of High Attestation, State Attestation Commission at Hudson University. And after the meeting, this girl came to me, and she had 2 children up to that time. I am Mr. Sitnikov. I want a consultation. I study the image of a father. There is a lack of literature, and she was a first-year student. Then I was the chairman of State Attestation Commission, and after the defense, our candidate came to me and said that she wanted to continue this research. I did not work at Hudson University, and she, according to different methods, difficulties of correlation of St. Petersburg and Tuvan teenagers, and she graduated from Tuvan University, and then she became an employee of this university. She finished bachelor's programs at the Faculty of Defectology at St. Petersburg University. She is very prudent and achieves the aims. Psychology gives the opportunity to understand the problems from the very childhood. And Aya was deprived of the father at an early age, and she was raised in a troubled family, multi-children family, and she was brought up by her grandmother. And Aya herself created a family, gave birth to 2 children, and she has a brilliant father or husband. And being a student, a bachelor student, she gave birth to a daughter. Then when she was a master's student, she gave birth to the other girl. She worked a psychologist at school, and she gave birth to a 3rd child, a son. It proves her organized type. She's very organized. She had she is not afraid of troubles. Many children were from rural families. And she had a task to translate from tuvan language some terms, words and expressions. She won grants. The head of Tuva Republic. She was an activist in social campaigns, and among Russian colleagues and non-Russian colleagues, I have many foreign students, but I have not ever met such candidates as our candidate. Thank you very much for your positive feedback, dear colleagues, dear board members, and those who are present here. Are there any volunteers to express your opinion? No volunteers. Then allow me to finish the discussion and acceptance of questions. Before making conclusions and voting, dear board members and our candidates, do you have any questions concerning our agenda and so on? Lyudmila Alexandrovna? I have no remarks. The procedure was excellent. Grant Mikhailovich, what about you? I don't have any objections. It's very brilliant organizations. Distinguished Lyudmila Georgievna, Plana Zakhotovna, everything is okay? No questions and objections. I have no objections concerning the agenda and voting. Before we start the voting, we have an opportunity to announce a break when the sound of the broadcast will be muted. Do we need such a break? I think that we don't need such a break. We have discussed everything. I think that we don't need such a break. Dear colleagues, now it is 1:40 p.m. according to Moscow time, and we turn to the conclusive minutes of the meeting. Dear colleagues, I see that the answer is positive. I am raising the question of awarding Salchak Aya the degree of the candidate of psychological sciences in the scientific specialization 535 social psychology, political and economic psychology to an open roll call. And I remind you that voting for every board member agrees that point 11 was not violated by the candidate. Let me read it out. In the dissertation, the candidate for a scientific degree has to refer to the author and the source of borrowing materials for or individual results. When using the dissertation, the results of scientific papers performed by the applicant for a scientific degree, personally in co-authorship, the applicant for an academic degree is obliged to note this circumstance in the dissertation. I remind you that the decision of the Dissertation Council on the issue of awarding an academic degree is considered positive if more than half, but at least 3 members of the Dissertation Council who participated in the meeting voted for it in accordance with Clause 23 of procedure. I am Posakova. I vote for. I wish you, dear candidate, to expand your scientific horizon. I wish you to preserve tuvan culture and psychology. Thank you. Distinguished Lyudmila Pachebut, your opinion? I am for. Distinguished Professor Lyudmila Regush, I am for. And I see a vast opportunity to develop this dissertation. And today's defense proved it. And there are a lot of things and a lot of directions to develop in the near future. Vanessayan Grant Mikhailovich, we can't hear you. Please switch off your microphone. Switch on your microphone. I vote for taking into account the quality of the study, the report, and the answers to the questions. My opinion is positive. I also support this work. And counting of votes and the results of voting. Distinguished colleagues, out of 5 board members, 5 members voted for, no one voted against, and no one abstained from vote. The decision on awarding Salchak Aya an academic degree of the candidate of psychological sciences in the scientific specialization 535 social psychology, political economic sociology was accepted unanimously. Your concluding remark, dear candidate. Thank you very much for your attention. I would like to express my gratitude to St. Petersburg University for the opportunity to defend the dissertation at St. Petersburg University. Valery Leonidovich, thank you very much. My scientific supervisor, for your support and help. Svetlana Igorevna and Nadezhda Igorevna, thank you very much for your support. And I would like to thank our chairperson, Svetlana Zakhotovna, and all board members. Also, I would like to express my gratitude to my children for the joy and for their support. On behalf of everyone who are present here, let me congratulate you on this event. Distinguished board members, the meeting is declared closed. Thank you for your participation, for your support, for your inclusion, and for the present. Please switch off the live broadcast of the meeting. Thank you very much.